Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you from wherever you're joining us today. I thank everyone who have listened and watched first podcast on business introduction to business analysis. I also thank those who have provided comments, feedbacks on this very important discussion. Like I said during the first podcast, the first trainings, intention here is to make this knowledge accessible to people who ordinarily would want probably to go and pay somewhere for a training to get this thing done. The intention here is to make it accessible, make it very easy for anybody who has intention of transitioning to tech but doesn't know how to start. This is providing you with the opportunity of coming into tech as a business analyst. So the last time, what we did was to introduce business analysis to us, understand the definition of a business analyst, and everything that has to do with getting ourselves acquainted with the concept of business analysis. I remain your instructor today, Ifeanyi. I'm a CIBA certified professional, business analyst professional in the field of business analysis with over 9 years experience in the field. So today, I want us to look at another concept that has to do with business analysis, and is the concept of requirements and designs. One of the most common words you'll be hearing in business analysis or as a business analyst has to do with the concept of requirement and the concept of design. But before we do that, just a quick recap of the last class, just to rejig our memory of what we talked about in the last class. So in the last class, we tried to understand what really business analysis is. But before we did that, we looked at the certifications that we have in business analysis. We have the ECBA, we have the CCBA. ECBA is entry certification in business analysis. That one requires no experience. Then the capability certification in business analysis is the next one. That one requires 2 to 3 years of experience. And then the certified business analysis professional, which is the highest level of certification someone can get in business analysis, requiring minimum of 5 years experience. So in the last class, we looked at these certifications. We talked about the requirements, what you need to do to pass these exams. And we said that all you need to do is to follow us religiously on this training as we walk you through the Babok Guide. Babok Guide is the business analysis body of knowledge, which is the guide that regulates the practice of business analysis. It's issued by IIBA. IIBA is International Institute of Business Analysis, headquartered in Ontario, Canada. So we in this series of this training, we will walk you through all you need to know as contained in the Babok Guide, which will enable you to be able to practice professionally as a business analyst. We also continue to bring to life real life experiences that will enable you appreciate, even though you've never practiced as a business analyst before, it will enable you to appreciate what it takes to function as one. So in the last class, part of what we discussed was trying to understand the meaning of business analysis. And we told ourselves, as Babok defined it, that is the practice of enabling change in an enterprise. And how do we do that? We do that by identifying needs and recommending solutions that deliver value to stakeholders. So in that definition, you find that there are very important concepts, the concept of need, the concept of change, the concept of stakeholders, the concept of solutions, and the concept of value. So these 6 concepts I told us in the last class is one constitutes the business analysis core concept model. These 6 concepts interrelated. You cannot define one in isolation of the other. And they are the concepts that you keep finding yourselves dealing with as you work yourself in the practice of business analysis. We also went a step further to ask ourselves who is a business analyst, and we said that is anybody who practices the tasks as captured in the knowledge areas of business analysis. So if you're practicing anything else or any other tasks assigned to you in the office, probably as a business analyst, but not part of those tasks defined in the knowledge area, the IIBA does not consider you as a business analyst. It's only when you practice those tasks contained there, even though you might not even go by the nomenclature of a business analyst. That's when you are considered as a business analyst. And we went ahead to look at the structure of the Babok guide, and we did that starting with the knowledge areas. And we told ourselves that there are 6 knowledge areas in the Babok guide. We have the business analysis, planning and monitoring. We have elicitation and collaboration. We have requirement lifecycle management. We have strategy analysis. We have requirement analysis and design definition. And finally, we have solution evaluation. So that covers the 6 knowledge areas. As we walk ourselves further in this training, we'll take those knowledge areas one by one, look at each of the tasks contained in them, and try to explain them in very granular form with real life scenarios. And we talked about the key concepts in business analysis. We also talked about the underlying competencies and the techniques, the various techniques by which you can perform your tasks as a business analyst. And finally, we looked at the perspectives. And we told ourselves there are 5 perspectives to business analysis: the agile perspective, the business intelligence perspective, the business architecture perspective, the business process management perspective, and the information technology perspective. And so that's how we wrapped it up last time. So just by way of refreshing our memory. And so today we are talking about something still within the key concepts of business analysis, but we decided to take it separate for better understanding. And so that's why the topic of today's training is talking about understanding the concept of requirements and design in business analysis. So we'll proceed to ask ourselves what is requirement. And so for most of us, this is not the first time we are hearing the word requirement. When you entered high school or when you enter university, they must have told you some requirements. You needed to meet some minimum requirements you needed to meet before you could be given admission. So we know what requirements is, just something that you need to provide, something that is essential for you to have before something can happen. So that's the general understanding of what requirement is. You can see that the Merriam-Webster dictionary define requirement as something wanted, needed, or essential for something else to exist or occur. So generally, so the problem is that it's not that we don't understand what requirement. We know what requirement is generally. In engineering, is defined as a condition that must be satisfied for an output to be acceptable. So the requirement for a generator to function, for instance, is that there must be a fuel in the fuel tank, and there must be fuel in the engine, and you must have an ignition key to turn on the gen. So those requirements must be met before a generator can start. So those are the requirements to start the generator. But in business analysis, we tend to apply the meaning of requirement slightly differently. In fact, Babok defined requirement as a usable representation of a need. So if you think deep about this, it means that so the need comes in a form that is not usable. It comes in a form that is raw. It comes in a form that have rough edges, so to speak. And so the responsibility of the business analyst is to process the need and transform it to a form that makes it usable. Usable by who, you may ask? Usable by the various categories of stakeholders impacted by the need. So in documenting and defining requirements, you have the requirement that speaks to implementation subject matter experts. So for the developers that will build an application, for instance, you specify requirements for them in a particular format, but the format you specify for them is not the same format you specify requirements for executive management. That's why when we go further, you see that that's where Babok talks about requirement viewpoints, having viewpoints. So basically, is a representation of a need, and so that goes on to say that before you can convert a need into a requirement, you need to understand the need. So you can't have a requirement properly defined if the need is not properly understood. And so that's why the knowledge areas, IIBA carefully crafted the knowledge areas and assigned one body of knowledge in the knowledge area to elicitation and collaboration. So a whole body of knowledge area have tasks that deals with how to draw out information, how to understand the need. That's why if you move to that knowledge area of elicitation and collaboration, you'll be talking about how do you prepare for elicitation. Because for you to be able to draw out information, you need to prepare for it. How do you prepare for elicitation? How do you conduct the elicitation? How do you confirm the elicitation results? How do you communicate business analysis information? How do you manage stakeholders collaboration? So all those things are things that are contained in that knowledge area, as we'll see as we move ahead on this course. But I just want us to understand that needs they don't come well formed. That is why you call it a need is defined as a problem or an opportunity. So people might have a problem, but they don't understand it clearly. So your responsibility as a business analyst is to help them to understand the problem clearly. I'm just going to give you another example to give you an insight into how a requirement can be drawn from a need. So somebody who is sick, for instance, and maybe you're having fever, and you go to the hospital. So you know you have fever, but you don't really understand whether the fever is coming from malaria or it's coming from typhoid or it's coming from measles. So, but as you discuss with the doctor and the doctor tries to ask you questions, usually they call that diagnosis, he will now extract and elicit information from you that enables him to properly define what is wrong with you. So at that point, that problem you had is now becoming something usable. So as you provide more information to the doctor, he's getting information about the sickness you have that makes it more usable for him to be able to come up with what actually is wrong with you so that the problem can be solved. So that's is the best analogy you can use as a business analyst to uh, begin to visualize how business analyst converts a need to a requirement. So as you engage the stakeholders trying to understand uh, what the actual problem is or what the actual need is, and begin to ask questions, use various techniques as we will discuss later, you begin to draw out more information that at the end of the day, you will now come up with a requirement that it captures everything, more information, more insights into the need. And so that's what it's all about. That's why we spend a lot, because for the greater part of the time as a business analyst, you'll be dealing with requirements. You'll be dealing with requirements and be dealing with designs. So as you're trying to understand the need, you're also trying to create a solution. So that's why I spend a lot of time trying to explain what a requirement is. So we're going to move forward to the next slide. So the next slide is now talking about what is a design. After you've understood the need and you've come up with a requirement, It doesn't stop there. So as a business analyst, you want to solve the problem now. So to solve the problem, you now need to come up with design options. Babok defined design as a usable representation of the solution. Um, the design is just a representation. So we need to understand the keyword being representation of the solution. It's not the solution, it just represents it. And I'm going to give an example of a design to say that. So if you're trying to build a house and your architect gives you an architectural drawing of the house you intend to build, the architectural drawing of your house is a design, is a representation of the house you intend to build. But it is not the house itself. It's only a representation of the house. And so what that does is that enables you to visualize how the house will look like if it is built. So designs enables us to visualize, enables us as business analysts, or enables the stakeholders to appreciate how the solution will look in build. So designs can come in form of prototypes, it can come in form of wireframes, it can come in form of text and diagrams and matrices, as we will see as we proceed further on the course. Um, and here comes the twist now. So as you practice as a business analyst, you will begin to find out that as you come up with requirements, and requirements can now lead to design. But then as you're now trying to come up with a design and you're trying to explain the design, probably look at the architecture of the design, how everything pieces together as a system, you might find out that there's a part of the design that you don't understand clearly. And at that point, you need to now go and ask more questions from the stakeholders in order to understand it. And so you can see that the design is now leading back to more requirements to be gathered. And as you're gathering more requirements, you go back to iterate and improve on the design. So uh, design and requirements seems to be two sides of the same coin. So one keeps leading to the other, and the other keeps leading to the other. And that's why in Babok, you'll find that it said that the line separating the design and requirement is often blurred, because at one point you're talking about a requirement, and at the next time you see yourself talking about design again, just like I've explained. So you find that it's just now a matter of perspective. But as we go further, and as you gain knowledge through the knowledge areas, you understand the difference when you're talking about requirements and when you're talking about design. So I've tried to say on this slide that the distinction is usually very subtle. At one point, you might find yourself talking about design, and some other point, you might find yourself talking about requirements. Okay, so I also want to emphasize that even though business analyst is expected to come up with design options, but at times, especially when it requires a lot of specialty, for instance, if there is a need to make an architectural design of a software implementation, you might find out that a business analyst might not have the right skills or specialty to do that. So he might rely on developers or a solution architect to do that. So at that point in time, Babok tries to distinguish between technical design, in quote, and then normal design, so to speak. So the technical designs are usually done by implementation subject matter experts. So I just needed to say that. So your responsibility as a business analyst in this case is just to ensure that whatever design or whatever technical design that the implementation subject matter experts have crafted or have come up with aligns with the solution and aligns with the need. In other words, you have to just make sure as a business analyst that the technical design solves the problem That's a responsibility that's expected of you at this point. But nobody's going to expect you as a business analyst to come up with a technical design, because you don't even have the skill set to do that. So I just needed to put this out so that we don't get scared when we talk about technical designs. What they expect us to have or do as business analysts is just to understand the concept of design. So we move forward to see how requirements and designs created. How are they born? So from the little discussion we have so far, you will see that if you try to come up with a requirement on your head without asking questions, you will only be solving a fraction of the problem. Imagine if you walked into a doctor's office, you're not feeling fine, and the doctor does not ask you any question. You just sit down, the doctor just looks at you and starts writing drugs, prescriptions for what he feels is wrong with you, and after that, he asks you to go and see the nurse. How will you look at that doctor? You will imagine that something is wrong with him. So, and that is the way it is with business analysts. We don't just sit down on our own and assume that this is the problem, or assume that this is the solution. We elicit information from stakeholders. So the first thing we do is that once there's a problem or there's a need, and we ask ourselves, who are the people likely impacted by the need? Who are the people who are likely to be affected by this need? And so we use that as a first way of gathering the stakeholders. We can also go to the sponsors to find out who will be impacted by that particular project. And so we gather as much stakeholders as possible. And then depending on the nature of the stakeholders, depending on our stakeholder analysis, depending on the plan or the stakeholders' approach, we will now come up with a technique of how we will now gather information from the stakeholders. So it is from the stakeholders that we gather information about the requirements, about the needs. So we gather information from them about the needs, which is either the opportunity we are trying to take advantage of or the problem we are trying to solve. And we now use that information we've gathered from them to specify and model requirements. Now, at this point, it's important to say that this is done iteratively. So iteratively means it's not a compartmentalized activity. It's not something you just do and it ends. Is an ongoing activity, something you do on and on and on and on and on and on. So there's no end to elicitation. There's no end to getting information about a problem. What you do is, as you're getting new information, you're adding it to, you're documenting it, you're prioritizing, especially in a agile environment. You put in the information you're gathering, putting the requirements in the backlog, and at the end of the day, you get the product owner, or depending on the governance approach, you're prioritizing and deciding which one you're implementing first. And the same also goes for the solution. When you come up with the solution option, you have to validate it against the stakeholders, make sure that what you're trying to build aligns and solves their problem they have. Because if you remember that the stakeholders is the one that decides and determines what value is. So if you don't validate the design against the stakeholders, you might be solving a problem you think that will deliver value to them, but it's not. Um, like you say, there's a cliche that I say that it is the customer that determines what excellent service is. So, in that manner, it's also the stakeholder that determines what is of value to him. So, you need to, and that's why stakeholder collaboration is a very, 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 very important subject in business analysis, because you're dealing with human beings. So, um, requirements and designs are created by gathering information from stakeholders. And if you look at the slide, you see where I say that this is done iteratively, and that's why, like I told us earlier, in the knowledge area of elicitation and collaboration, after you prepared for elicitation and conducted elicitation, you confirm elicitation results Who are you confirming it from? You're confirming either from source, which could be your stakeholders, or from other existing documents, just to ensure accuracy and consistency in the requirements you've gathered. And then when you move a step further to requirement analysis and design, when you now try to convert the elicited information into requirements, you now perform two functions that you normally find in requirement lifecycle management. Or rather, two functions you have in requirement analysis and design, which is to verify requirements and to validate requirements. So when you are verifying requirements, you're trying to make sure that it's of the right standards, it contains the right attributes, and then validation just to make sure that it's aligned to the business goals and objectives. So, and all those things they are doing is in line with stakeholders' requirement, what the stakeholders have told us. As we move a step further, you will see the requirement categorization and how stakeholders are the one that give us information about what they want to see in requirements. And this also, what I've told us about requirements also goes for designs, because I've told us that requirements and designs are basically two sides of the same coin. Okay, so here we are to the requirement classifications Sigma. So I've told us at the beginning that you develop requirements from needs. And that's why we said that the requirements are usable representation of a need. And so here we'll now be looking at the fore categorization of requirements. I prefer to use the word categorization or classification, not necessarily types, because they are all requirements, but then we categorize them depending on the level of information that they contain. So the first level of requirements you develop is called the business requirement. So the business requirement usually is high level in the sense that it contains very little information, and it just tells you a story about the goal or objective of the project. After that, you now have the stakeholder requirement, which tells you, gives you information about the stakeholder needs. And after that, you now have the solution requirement, which is further broken down into functional and non-functional requirements. And then finally, the transition requirement. So we move to the next page so we can look at that. So you can see a diagram showing what I've just described, how you move from business requirement to stakeholder requirement, how you move from stakeholder requirement to solution requirement, and how solution requirement is divided into two, into functional requirements and non-functional requirements. And then finally, we have the transition requirements. So let's begin to explain and see what all these various categories of classification of requirements, what they actually mean. So for the business requirements, I told us that they are high-level requirements that tells us about the organizational goals and more specifically organizational objectives that the initiator will want to achieve. So at this point, we need to know, I just need to quickly state the difference between a goal and an objective. So a goal is usually broad and not defined in the sense that it doesn't have a time frame, it doesn't contain any metrics for measurement. For instance, if I say I want to save 1 million, that's a goal. So it's broad, it's not defined, doesn't have a time frame, doesn't have any metrics for measurement. But if I say I want to save 1 million in 2025 between June and December, that is no more a goal, that's now an objective, because it now has a time frame, it's now specific, I can now track it. So if I'm saving 1 million between June and December, I can actually divide it to then track how much am I supposed to save per month. So you can see that that's an objective is smart. Is measured by the fact of whether it is smart or not. Smart to me is an acronym that means specific. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it realistic? Is it time bound? So once you have these 5 parameters present, you can now say that that goal is an objective. So a business requirement are high level requirements that explains an organizational goals and desired outcomes. So they specify what the organization um, want to achieve. They are usually defined by the sponsor or the owner or the business owner or the product owner, and so that's to say that they come from the strategic level, usually coming from the management level. Babok defined it as statement of goals and objectives and outcome that describe why a change has been initiated. So it's usually broad level. And so because they are broad level, as we move down the line, um, under requirement lifecycle management, the knowledge area for requirement lifecycle management, you will find that because they are broad, they are candidates, they are candidate for reuse. Because one of the criteria for maintaining requirement is that those requirements should be reusable. So business requirements are usually candidates for reuse because they are high level. They are not specific. The more a requirement is specific, the more you can no longer use it in multiple initiatives. But the more a requirement is broad, the more it can fit into different places. That's the point I'm trying to draw out here. So from business requirements, we move to stakeholder requirements. Okay, before that, you need to give us an example of a business requirement. So this has to do with probably a financial institution or an organization that wants to increase their customer acquisition, and so the business requirement is to say that we need to increase our customer acquisition by 70% within the next 6 months. That's what they want to achieve. So you can see that it clearly states the objective of what they want to do. And you can see that the objective meets the criteria of SMART, like I've told us before. So SMART to say it is specific, it is measurable, it is achievable, it is realistic, it's time bound. So it's time bound because it has to be done in 6 months. It's measurable. We are tracking 70% of what we want to do. Is achievable because probably the organization has the capability to do these acquisitions, or if they don't have, they're going to increase their capability to be able to embark on this change. So that's how you define a business requirement. And so, like I said, the business requirement is formed using the need, the business need, which is either the problem you're trying to solve or the opportunity you're trying to take advantage of. So, and it doesn't contain a lot of details. But as we move forward to the stakeholder requirements, um, so typically to take it to a real life situation, so let's say the MD have come to give this broad goal to say, marketing team, I want us to increase, to the board to say, I want us to increase customer acquisition by 70% within the next 6 months. And you as a BA was in that meeting. So after that broad directive have been given by management, or that strategic vision have been given by management, you're not going to go back to the MD to start asking him, what do you really mean by this? So you now move to the marketing team, or they come down to the real stakeholders who will really drive this vision, to now have a meeting with them and understand the nitty gritty of what needs to be done. And so that's where we now move down from the business requirement to the stakeholders. So you're now meeting the real stakeholders, who are the people who this need will impact, or who will drive this need, to say, what actually do you want? What actually is your need? How do you really want us to drive this? So stakeholder requirements now speaks to specific needs or specific expectations that stakeholders want to be met. So they will now tell you, okay, for us to be able to do this customer acquisition, this is what we want you to do for us as a business analyst. This is how we want you to come up with a solution that can help us to drive this acquisition. So that is what that is how you move from stakeholder from business requirement to stakeholder requirement. You can see that the it's getting more interesting as we move from one level to another. So after the stakeholder requirement, I think it's also important that okay, so Babok describes it as the needs of the stakeholder that must be met to achieve the business requirement. So like I said, he's now talking about the specific needs or specific wants of the stakeholders, no longer the broad objective. So let me show you the example. Follow me, let me show you the example of how we now moved that broad objective of we want to increase customer acquisition by 70% in the next 6 months. We now made it how the stakeholders told us what they now wanted. So in the next slide, you see um, so the stakeholders are now saying, okay, um, so look at this example. We would like the customer onboarding process to be fully automated. So probably it was pretty manual. And so because it was pretty manual, we are losing a lot of footfall in terms of tracking all their customers. So they're now saying for us to be able to achieve that in very specific terms, the stakeholders are saying we want it to be fully automated so that customers can onboard themselves through digital channels. And apart from that, they're also saying we want to be able to generate the number of customers onboarded. So they want to be able to track the number of customers that are onboarded on a daily and weekly basis. So they're now telling you specifically, so give our customers digital channels so that they can onboard themselves. They're also saying, in addition for them onboarding themselves, we want you to solve a need for us. We want to be able to track how they are onboarding themselves. So these are very specific needs that the stakeholders have mentioned. So you can see how we transited from a very broad goal and objective in business requirements to a specific need in stakeholder requirements. As we move a step further to solution requirements, so solution requirement is now talking about what are we going to build in solution that will solve that need that the stakeholder has mentioned. So that's why it's called solution requirement. So solution requirement speaks about capabilities of a solution that addresses the stakeholder's needs or addresses the stakeholder's requirements. And that is why solution requirement is talking about functional requirement and non-functional requirement. So functional requirement to say what specific features are in the solution you are building that solve that customer's needs. So customers they are saying they want to be able to onboard customers during digital channel, using digital channels. So what are you going to build in solution that can enable customers to onboard themselves? They are saying that we want to be able to track customers acquisition, the onboarding on a daily or weekly basis. What are you going to give the stakeholders that will enable them to track customers? How are you going to solve that problem, that need that they want? Because they mentioned two needs. One, they want customers to onboard themselves digitally as their stakeholders requirement. They also said they want to be able to track the number of customers onboarding themselves. In solution requirement, you're now saying how. It answers the question how. Which feature are you going to provide in the solution that will solve these needs? And that's whatever feature you provide, that's the solution requirement. And that's the functional requirement. The functional is solving a particular function. The non-functional requirement speaks to the condition that just have to exist for that solution to function optimally. So it's something that improves the look and feel of the solution. It's not performing any specific function, but it improves appeal, it improves user experience, it improves acceptability on the part of the customer, it improves customer perception of the solution. but it's not solving any particular function in the solution. That is why it's called non-functional requirements. So an example of a non-functional requirement can be how fast a system processes, how fast the onboarding procedure is, or the background color you use in designing the application. So these are non-functional requirements, or how fast you can add additional features to that solution without having to shut everything down. So the scalability. So if you move to the next page, you can see where we talked about, give an example of the non-functional requirement. So example of the functional requirement, first of all. So functional requirements describe the capability that a solution must possess. We've talked about that. So it speaks to specific feature. So an example here, using what we've said before, is that ability of a customer to visit Google or Apple Store from digital devices and download our app for onboarding. So to solve the need of digital onboarding, like the stakeholder mentioned, we want to create an app, put it in an Apple Store or Play Store, so that customers can download it and onboard themselves. So that has solved that first problem. So the second problem they mentioned is ability to see record of onboarding on a daily or weekly basis. And we are saying for this one, end users should be able to log into our in-house customer onboarding application, access a visualization dashboard, input search parameters. So search parameter can be days or weeks, and generate reports in PDF and Excel for a number of customers. So you can see how we are now creating two solutions that solve those problems. We are creating an app to solve the problem of digital acquisition, and we are creating a visualization dashboard to solve the problem of report generation. Okay, so let's look at the non-functional requirements. So for non-functional requirement, like I told us, is something that just have to describe, it describes the performance of the system, it concentrates on its look and feel. And that's why you can see the example says, ability of users to generate the specified results within 5 seconds. So this is talking about speed. So other categories of non-functional requirement are accessibility, safety, scalability, reliability, consistency, durability, agility, and reusability. So I'm sure you now understand the difference between non-functional requirements and functional requirement. But if you have any questions outside this, you can drop a question on the comment section and I will attend to it. All right, so we'll now move to the last, not the least, and that's the transition requirements. So transition, like the name sounds, are those requirements that enables you to transit a solution from the current state to the future state, but which are no longer needed once the solution is in the future state. Let me say that again. These are requirements that enable us to transit a solution from the current state to the future state, but are no longer needed once the solution is in the future state. So to that extent, they are very, very temporal, short tenured, short period requirements. And so let's look at how Babok defined it. So Babok said that these are capabilities that the solution must have and the condition the solution must meet to facilitate transition from the current state to the future state, but which are not needed once the change is complete. They are differentiated from other requirement types because they are of a temporal nature. So the key word here is that once the solution is in the future state, you don't have any need of the transition requirements again. An example of a transition requirement can be user training. So when you transit to a new solution, or like the one we've described, that's going to have a visualization dashboard, you conduct user training to train the staff on how to use the dashboard, how they can search and download customer acquisition information. We can run the training for like 1 or 2 weeks, and once everybody have learned it, there's no need to continue running that training anymore. You don't need it anymore. So user training is an example of transition requirements. So we'll move to the next. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion today on the understanding of requirements and designs. I hope that we'll be able to grab something that we can remember that speaks to our understanding of requirements and design. I will encourage us to visit the YouTube channel, drop any questions in the comment section. The comment section is open. If there's any part you don't understand, you can drop questions. My email address is also on the YouTube channel. You can send me an email to ask for clarification. If there's any part of the class you don't understand. I've also deliberately lettered or numbered the training. So this is the second training. I did it that way so that at any point you join, you can be able to connect the dots. So the next training we'll have will be the third training, the fourth, the fifth. I will keep taking it in that order until we run through the whole babok. We also find a way to bring in the practical aspect of the course, where we will look at how to draw flow diagram, process charts, how to draft user stories, use case and scenarios, all those practical aspects that speaks to what you're expected to do on the day-to-day job as a business analyst. So we also will incorporate that in this training. The intention, like I said at the start, is that just by listening to this training, you don't need to go and pay any other person for a training in business analysis. This is all you need to be able to understand what business analysis is and to be able to function and practice as a business analyst. I thank everyone that have listened to me. I thank you for your time. It's been your lead instructor, Ifan Yokolo. I'm a certified business analysis professional. Thank you for listening to me and see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.